You're welcome along to the Keith Andrews Show with you every Thursday, although next week might be a little tweak to that. We'll come back to you on that one. Joining me in house today is Mr. Philip Egan. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having us.
No problem at all. Right, straight in. It's been a bit of a circus the last couple of weeks in Irish football. I am certainly glad to see the back of this international break. I can only imagine what it's been like for a player. Players by nature are good at just batting down the hatches, getting through things, I think, and looking after themselves, and I think you have to be that way. But for us on the outside, it's been an international break to absolutely forget. It's culminated obviously in that spanking that we got off Wales in Cardiff. Yeah,
it's been farcical and it'll probably dampen the mood a bit. But before we get into that, Keith, I want to just play a little game. Okay? You're going to have to look. You're going to have to look at the screen, right? And you're going to see a series of images, and I want you to answer, what do they all have in common?
Show me.
Okay, so there he is, World Cup winning captain, Fabio Cannavaro.
Legend.
Yeah, Goran Ivanisevic finally won the Wimbledon title.
I watched
Niall Horan. You do know who he is, don't you?
I was working it out. I'm not that familiar with him. Shane Warne.
Yeah, good cricketer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you woman Stella McCartney.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ledge, like him. Thomas Muller.
So what do they all have in common?
You're going to have to give me another clue.
They have something in common with you, Keith.
It's not Barnett. They're not all sports people. Joe's laughing through the stage. Joe, you can't say anything about Barnett's, by the way, with that thing in your head.
Obviously, I can't say anything either.
I don't know.
The day. What day is it today?
It's the 13th of September.
And is that a significant date in your life?
It's the end of this international chapter, yes.
Okay.
No. I'm not making this easy for you, am I?
No, I just need a birthday cake.
Ah, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. I haven't had mine yet today.
There you go. Well, lads, just going to jump out of the cake. Well, so all of those
stripper coming.
They share a birthday with you.
Do they really?
What a five-a-side team you could get going.
Yeah.
Thomas Muller, Cannavaro.
Yeah.
I believe Keith Tracy as well. It's his birthday as well.
Oh, I should have known that because I played with Keith Tracy.
So there's four players you have.
Yeah.
Ivanisevic could
Stella McCartney can design the kit.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're off to a winner, aren't we?
So, sorry.
So basically, what am I doing in here on my birthday? I know.
I always make sure I never work.
Dedication.
Never work on your birthday because
I've never been a big birthday person, to be fair, so it doesn't really.
After a certain age, they just.
Yeah. When you get to like 38, it's a bit like a bit of a nothing. A couple of years I might do something for my 40th, New York. But yeah, thanks for that, Philip. Thanks for pointing that out and to everybody. Oh man, nice.
Happy birthday.
Thanks very much. Where's my card?
It's in the post.
Yeah, I even bought breakfast for Tommy this morning. That's unbelievable.
That's shocking that he
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right, let's have a look at what we've got coming up on the show. Ireland's next step. We've chatted to Liam Lawrence. I caught up with him about an hour ago. He's a busy man, so we had to do a little pre-record. Andy Reid's going to come up on the show and we'll do a little bit of a preview of the weekend and the Premier League action. Right, let's go back.
Yeah, okay, I interrupt you. Sorry. Yeah, it has been shambolic and it's been frustrating, so that's probably why I wanted to lighten the mood a bit.
Well, I'm glad you did because you put a smile on my face because I was getting ready to get a little bit angry where it's
you can get angry now
a little bit. Well, it does make you angry because... And it'll be interesting to get Andy Reid's take on this about, is it players, is it staff, is it all of the above, the organisation, where we are? Is this just where we are now? Because I was looking at Andy Reid, the team that he made his debut in 2003, and we know the players available. It's the same old story, and not enough playing at Premier League level. 6 of our lads were playing in the Premier League that started against Wales last week. There was only 3 for Northern Ireland who played so well against Bosnia. I know people out there will be saying, yeah, but they lost. Yeah, but there's ways of winning.
They have a purpose
and there's ways
and a plan.
of losing. Yeah, exactly. So, look, performance-wise against Wales, I think we've been there, we've done that, it's been talked about to death. And then over the weekend, it was an unfortunate incident where Stephen Ward's leaked voice note gets out there and paints a picture of, let's not forget what Martin brought up. Surprisingly to me.
That was it, because obviously, you know, the way things work now with technology, the audio starts circulating and people hear it and you're thinking, what do? You've got to be quite careful here. But Martin O'Neill basically came out and gave everyone the green light. That
it was obviously Stephen. But even before that though, Phil, he brought up the kind of John Walters, Harry Arthur altercations with Roy when he wasn't particularly asked. He voluntarily brought that up, which was a surprise to me. Then this comes out. Then he confirms that it is Stephen Ward. Stephen Ward's obviously been naive in letting it out there, but also betrayed, I think, by whoever
you got
of his
a question
friends.
who you're hanging around
and I have to be completely honest. You know, we chat off camera here and in the office, and if we go for a coffee with people, and you, especially with your mates who you're very close to, you talk having a pint, and you're going, yeah, this happened, that happened. You chat about normal life, because that is Stephen Ward's normal life.
Yeah.
Most people work in an office 9 to 5. That is Stephen Ward's life, and there's obviously an intrigue when it comes, I would say more so, to Roy Keane. The amount of questions they probably get asked about, like, what's he like, what does he do, what's he on the training ground, in the hotel, does he speak to you, is he funny, all these types of dynamics. And I don't think Stephen Ward portrayed it in a dramatic fashion in any way.
No, what was interesting listening to it is that kind of the way he summed it up at the end was, you know, wasn't much in it, just
that's just Roy.
Just Roy. So maybe we've overreacted. We think, well, the players are actually used to this. And maybe some of the other players are looking at Harry Arter thinking, you know, get over it. Like,
yeah, my take on that would be, and again, we don't know the absolute ins and outs because obviously Stephen wasn't there. It's second-hand information, but if it is along the lines of they're managing injuries, I think it's sensible. I really do. You go on these international breaks, and I remember going back to when we were running the trap and we'd be there for a 7-day, 10-day period. You trained every day. That's what caught up with us in the end, amongst other things, in Euro 2012, that we trained at that intensity for so long in camp that by the time we got to games and it was already too late, you're flagging. So with sports science in this day and age, you have to adhere to the expert advice you're being given, right?
Yeah, the days of the magic sponge are gone, where you can say, I've got a bit of a niggle there. The doc is saying, like, the scans show it. You have to trust your doctors.
You've got long-standing injuries that you need to manage to ensure they don't get to a stage where you're absolutely out of the game. You have to down tools. So certainly someone like John Walters, when you get to that type of age, you don't train all the time. They're very few and far between the type of players at that age that train like a 25-year-old. You have to manage it. Don't know what the issue is with Harry Arter, but I don't have a problem with that. But clearly, Roy Keane had an issue with that. Now, there could also be an argument to be made where Roy Keane, I have no doubt about it, played through pain barriers. And I've played with players that you think you could play in this game and you feel a little bit let down where you just get through it. I think Daniel Sturridge would be one player.
Yeah, Stephen Gerrard referenced it, didn't he? That
he could be criticised, couldn't he?
Absolutely. I always felt with Sturridge, as soon as Suarez left and he became the main man, the injuries started cropping up again. And now that there's no pressure on him at Liverpool, magically he's not injured as much.
But Keane played through that. There's no doubt about that. He was an absolute warrior as a player. There's an argument to be made. If he had been managed in a better way and taken care of medically, and of course they didn't have the expertise then that the players have now, his career would have lasted longer.
I can remember him getting injured for Manchester United at Anfield. I think he did his metatarsal. Just walked off the pitch, kind of shaking his head. You know, I can't continue. But the fact that he just walked off, and he has in the past as well talked about players like Ruud van Nistelrooy, who had injury problems himself. When they were at Manchester United, he looked at players like Ruud van Nistelrooy and thought, you could play through the pain barrier, but in hindsight, maybe I should have taken a leaf out of their book. But that's the way it is now. Sports science has taken over. You don't take the risks.
Yeah, well, certainly when it comes to training, because the be-all and end-all
is the match,
is the game.
Yeah,
that's it. That's what you absolutely get ready for. So John Walters, certainly at the age he is, look, I think what it highlights for me is the evolution in the game that there has been in so many aspects: medical, sports science, recruitment, staff, the coaching that the players are getting, and the coaching that the players are now used to. So the broader aspect for me with this is, with Martin O'Neill, Keane, the way that Keane is speaking to players, that wasn't in a motivational fashion. That wasn't a half-time look against Wales, for instance. Can he instigate something to make the players just conjure up something and believe in something? It was at the side of a training pitch when the players are managing their injury. So that sends alarm bells ringing for me. It really does.
Do you think, though, we mentioned how modern it is, that our management team have been left behind?
Say that again.
our management team have been left behind. The game has evolved, but they haven't moved with it.
Who's been the most successful manager in the last 25, 30 years?
Well, we're all talking about Alex Ferguson.
Yeah. So Alex Ferguson, in my opinion, having not worked with him, obviously, having looked from afar, spoken to players that have played underneath him, spoken to staff who have worked underneath him, what Ferguson done for me was he evolved in a way where he was the constant. He pen-picked the best coaches, modern thinking coaches, Mullenstein, McLaren,
Carlos Queiroz.
Queiroz, yeah, was the other one. He had 2 spells in. He obviously one of them a little bit of a run in with Roy. Yeah. But we're going on a sidetrack there. But what he did was he reinvigorated everything. Yeah. He kept moving with the times. He embraced sports science.
Yeah.
And he allowed, if he's bringing you in to run the fitness side of the football club, he allowed you to do it. He placed that trust in you.
Yeah, exactly.
Where I think when you look at us, I think there's certainly screams of, have we evolved as a management team? Are Roy Keane, Martin O'Neill doing the same things now that they did 10 years ago, 15 years ago? I would say quite possibly, yeah. And I think that's probably the disappointing part of it.
Yeah, well, I think back to the first game. I was in Georgia for Martin O'Neill's first competitive game when Aidan McGeady scored that wonder goal. The team that played, obviously, the likes of James McCarthy playing Robbie Keane. But I look at the team now and it's quite evident the players are not of the same ability. But I always still think of it though as an easy way out saying we don't have the players.
I think it's a cop-out. I think it's a cop-out, Phil, because I'm okay with it. And do you know what? I think you'll be okay with it. I think that the average fan out there are realistic and they know this. Yeah. Okay, but what they can't, and what I certainly can't comprehend, get to grips with, is what I see in Cardiff. I see a bunch of players, and I know we're missing the spine of the team, 6, 7, 8 players that may have started to get. I know, I'm aware of that, but I still feel with the personnel available and a manager that's been in place for nearly 5 years, there should have been more. There should have been more of a cohesion amongst that set of players. And it screamed at me, the players on the pitch, we're very rarely critical of players that they don't really put in a big shift. They don't show aggression. They don't show those traits that we are renowned for. Yeah. That was lacking on Thursday in Cardiff. And that was that was alarm bells for me.
Well, the alarm bells for me was when you had a teenager running the show against us. Whereas surely in a team talk before the game and you think, right, this lad is a young lad, get after him. And that's what Denmark did. Why couldn't we do it?
Well, you're right, because go flick it to club level, okay? So we get the team sheet in the club level, whoever I'm playing against, we don't know this lad. He's making his debut. Yeah. If I'm playing against him as a senior pro, I am smashing him in the first 5-10 minutes because I'm not letting him think, this is easy, this is reserve football, this is like 18s football, settle, get his touch, because what you want as a player in the first 5 to 10 minutes is lots of touches, get your feel of the game, you're involved, you're snapping you as you're turning out into areas. And you're right, he was like a Rolls Royce strolling at his pit and his confidence just grew and grew. And you're right, a 17-year-old ran the game.
Hanging balls around the place. I think of what we did to Joe Allen last year, where he had a good start to the game and was it David Moyer and James McClain?
The Welsh look at this a little bit different, funny enough. I was over there last week. I thought it was the turning point in the game, though, you're right.
Well, he was pulling the strings, but we didn't do that.
No.
And that was the disappointing thing. The difference a year makes, okay, you're missing the match winner, James McClain, but the pace, tempo that we played with just wasn't.
Okay, so we move on a few days. We've spoken about the leaked voice note. We get to Poland. We don't know. I thought there was a few positives. What I should highlight is I thought, now it's centre forward, so we are severely lacking in that area. I thought Egan looked very, very assured, looked like he wanted it. Plays in that system at club level at Sheffield United. Very comfortable on the ball. Sean Williams, who League of Ireland fans will know from his time, and then he's had to go lower leagues in England, has had to wait a long time. Again, very comfortable. And I thought probably the pick of the bunch for me was Callum O'Dowda. And we've seen him in that more central area, being a driving force before. And I just think when I look at them, and I mentioned it in commentary the other night, I think there's places up for grabs. And I think that has to be now, because I think as a management team, you get to a certain stage in your reign and you think, okay, this player has done particularly well for me but he hasn't been performing for how long that's been. I need to start looking at different players, and I think those few players that I mentioned, I think they're in the reckoning for next month.
Is he going to change the formation though?
I don't know, because is it 3 of the last 4 friendlies we've played a back 3?
Yeah.
USA, Turkey, and now Poland.
Yeah, I can even remember he tried it against Mexico last year.
That's right, in the previous year, yeah.
But it was a disaster. Yeah. I think McLean was playing as a left wing back.
That's right.
Whereas we didn't mention, I thought Enda Stevens did well. Like,
yeah, I did as well.
A player that actually, even when he came on in Wales last week, he put in a great tackle. Yeah. He actually, a defender that senses danger before it happens. That's what you're looking for.
Well, his positioning on a couple of occasions, and again, I mentioned it in commentary. You know, he gets there just in the nick of time. But if he's, for instance, if James McLean is playing left wing back and not Enda Stevens, it's probably a goal on a couple of occasions, because obviously James is a forward-thinking player, doesn't have that kind of sense of defensive instincts. But he's done really well in the Stevens at Sheffield United, again, in a left wing-back role, but I don't know whether you've seen much of Sheffield United. They play like wingers. Yeah. Like, they literally are forward-thinking, a little bit like Wolves, and we'll come on to Matt Doherty in a couple of minutes. Very front-foot football. And again, do you know what I look at when I see these players? I just see success stories. They've had to go around the houses to get to where they are now. They really have, all of them. O'Brien, Callum O'Dowd, Johnny Egan, Shawnee Williams, and then the Stevens, Portsmouth, and then he gets his move to Sheffield United off the back. They've obviously got character and guts. So going back to the original point, I think fans are realistic. If they see a group of players, a staff first and foremost, putting a group of players, regardless of ability, into a system, and they give a good account of themselves, and there's an organisation, I think fans go, do you know what? That's where we are, lads. That is where we are.
It's trying to get consistency in the formation. Let's look at England. They got to a semi-final at a World Cup, and people say, look, they had an easy draw. But Gareth Southgate decided early doors he wanted to play 3 at the back, and he changed it up. And
literally as soon as they qualified, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he got rid of players. He thought, no, you're not going to suit the system. So he stuck to it. Now, Martin O'Neill he doesn't have that luxury where he can leave out so many players, because when he picks a squad, there's only a certain amount of players that he can leave out. And to be honest, the way things look now, he can't leave too many out. But if he wants to go with 3 at the back, I've no problem with him trying it in a friendly, but I just wonder what's on the line next month against Denmark and Wales. Will he have the bottle for it?
Well, I think, when you come to friendlies, and there's a lot of like scepticism around friendlies in general, but the way I have always looked at friendlies has been, it's opportunities. It's opportunities for established players to drop off a little bit, because they can't particularly enhance their reputation too much in a friendly. The opportunities comes for those players that we've just been mentioning. How do they enhance their reputation? How do they lay down a marker? How do they get in the manager's mind? How do they grab the headlines like Aidan O'Brien did on Wednesday morning? And that's what it's all about. So friendlies in general, there's an air of scepticism around them. I don't think there was around this one. There was an air of anticipation from the public that if we get another doing here, this could become very, very tricky for the FAI, for Martin O'Neill, going into a crucial doubleheader next month. I just think the way they approached it, and the performance and the result, just calms things going into next month.
For the moment.
For the moment. And I think that was the most important thing. So does the 3 at the back become relevant for next month? I don't know, because I really do think they treated that game in Poland as a more important game than probably what it was.
Well, certainly we treated it more important than Poland. The fact that Lewandowski
played 45 minutes, get your cap.
Probably goals.
I can't read anything into the 3 at the back. What I would say is I do think we've got...
Do we look better with it though, is probably what I'm getting at. Do you think it works better than what we have?
The dynamic for me is it a 3 at the back or is it a 5 at the back?
Effectively it's a 5, just the way we play.
Right.
But it just what was noticeable the other night was when players had the ball, they seemed to have more options, which we didn't have in Wales.
I think Sean Williams was a big part of that. The first pass, when you win the ball back, the fact that the back 3 dropped out and covered the full width of the pitch, that you were able to go back to Randolph. And let's not forget, Poland didn't engage us high up, especially in the first half. They did on a couple of occasions. They highlighted in the start of the second half, they started letting Kevin Long have it on his left foot, kept him down that side, and we didn't give him an easy enough pass to get out from that left-sided centre half, and I felt a little bit sorry for him actually. But if it becomes a back 5 and the 2 wing backs are pegged back, So Cyrus Christie and then the Stevens the other night, whoever it's going to be next month, if it is a 5. The 3 in front of that, and on the outside of the 3 in front of that, was Callum O'Dowda and Jeff Hendrick to start with, okay? So what they were having to do was, they were covering basically the width, not far off of the 18-yard box, and having to get across to the opposition fullbacks when they were going. Now, Poland were so slow in their build-up play. If they're quicker, like Denmark can switch play quite easily, like Wales can do and prove they can do last week against us, then it becomes an issue. You create an overload on the far side, and that's when the work needs to be done on, okay, now it becomes Kevin Long, you're the left back, and the Stevens, you're the left winger. There's your 2v2. But there was a real reluctance for one of those centre halves to really get out and engage, and for our wing backs to go and really be aggressive and engage the Polish full-backs as such. So they will be the flaws in it. It needs work. It's not a system you're just going to flick up and work really, really easily.
It's players not being used to it either. Like Kevin Long doesn't play in a back 3. So I mentioned Mexico. Richard Keogh was part of a back 3 that night. And the last thing Richard Keogh wanted was to be dragged out towards the wing. He's a centre half, and when he plays at club level, he can get his full back to tuck in and cover him. You know, he wants to stay in around the edge of the box, and if there's anything put in, he'll get rid of it.
It's a grey area because players want to go out. Players, centre halves don't necessarily want to go out into that area. I thought he'd done well the other night as well, by the way, Richard Keogh. Stepped out well at times when Cyrus Christie did commit, but it wasn't the norm. He was vocal. He wore the armband properly. Didn't he? He led the team by example. He realised the situation the team were in, the management team were in, and the fact that there were some young players kind of sprinkled amongst it. I want to touch on Matt Doherty before we move on. So Martin came out a couple of weeks ago and mentioned about the competition for places in that area. We obviously know Seamus Coleman, our captain, who unfortunately looks doubtful, I would suggest, for next month, and obviously Cyrus Christie getting the nod. It's been a frustrating time. So these are the quotes. It's great that Matt is getting the opportunity to play in the Premier League. At club level, it looks as if he can deliver a really good ball when he gets the angle, but I want him, when he's got wide in a forward position, to go and test the fullback, to go and take him on. Whereas at Wolves, he gets to a certain distance and he checks backs and gives it back. I'd want him to do what Seamus and Cyrus basically do, which is drive forward. Hopefully the experience of playing in the Premier League regularly will stand him in good stead. Now, go on.
Yeah, I just thought the other night was a missed opportunity because Cyrus Christie has played under Martin O'Neill several times. He's done reasonably well. He gets a lot of criticism. Like, this is a guy that used to play as a winger and he's been moved into a converted fullback. He played in the 1-0 win against Germany. Seamus Coleman was injured that night, so he was part of that momentous victory. The other night he played as a right winger. He'll take on players, but he loses the ball. He'll take on players and then he can't cross it well. So that's where I have the issue with those quotes from Martin.
Well, on a couple of occasions the other night, especially in the first half, we were clearly wanting to keep the ball, clearly not. We didn't have the personnel up front to go direct anyway. So on a couple of occasions, he actually caused us some issues by driving into, because that's his game. He's not particularly Matt Doherty's very comfortable driving forward, not at the same pace and power obviously as Cyrus or Seamus for that matter, but he's very comfortable getting it, recognise where the space is and passing it. All right, so I think the other night would have been more so. Cyrus was running into traffic and congestion on 2 or 3 occasions that caused us issues, and I'm with you. I think he should be given the opportunity. I really do.
Like, if Seamus Coleman does miss the game, okay, Cyrus Christie is going to play instead. What happens if something happened to Cyrus Christie? Are we going to be in a situation where Martin O'Neill is putting someone like David Myler at right back? He did it when we drew.
Surely not.
Well, he did. David Myler played there in Gelsenkirchen. Actually played very well, in fairness to him. In the
he did, and David Myler's done very well when called upon for on. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But sometimes your face just doesn't fit. For whatever reason.
Is Matt Doherty going to be the new Wes?
Well, I've seen him a lot at Wolves, and look, he deserves a crack at the whip. Like, the unfortunate thing for Matt Doherty is our captain is probably our best player. I think most people would agree on that, and it's going to be very difficult to gate crash that. If it's a back 4, would he trust him in a left back area? Stephen Ward's come off injured, and we don't have a lot of players, and the Stevens did do quite well. I'm not sure. It's a difficult scenario.
I just would have liked to have a look at him.
So would I.
I often find as well, under Martin O'Neill, he puts these players in for friendlies, but puts them in almost impossible situations where they're played out of position and they don't excel. I remember before the Euros, before he broke his leg, Alan Judge.
Yeah, he was outstanding, wasn't he?
He was playing out in the wing in a friendly, and then
right wing,
and then
Switzerland, was it?
And Martin O'Neill was probably thinking he didn't do great, but that's not where he plays.
Well, the same can be said about Alan Brown playing holding midfielder against Turkey, going back to the March friendly, whereas Alan Brown is, and I've said this before, I'd liken him in style to Jeff Hendrick. He's a box-to-box, energetic, powerful midfielder, whereas he may well come in the latter stages of his career, but he's certainly not playing like that for Preston, where he's playing very, very well as an attacking midfielder. He's more advanced for them, but for me, he's a box-to-box.
And yet he's played in a different role in Ireland, in the Ireland team, and Martin O'Neill has actually pretty much come out and said he didn't do great. Like, that's not...
No, it's not fair. It's not fair on the player at all. But listen, we'll come back a little bit to that. I mentioned we caught up with Liam Lawrence a couple of hours ago. Let's hear what he had to say. Joining us on the line is Liam Lawrence, former Irish international. Liam, you're in the studio the other night doing the game for Sky Sports News, the Ireland against Poland game. So after a dismal performance against Wales in Cardiff on the previous Thursday, I thought there was some signs of positivity coming from that performance in Poland.
Yeah, me too. I thought the new lads did really well, applied themselves really well. I thought the whole team worked really hard, to be fair. I was a bit pressed Wales at times and got picked off. I thought they wouldn't go there and do that, but they did. They pressed, even from goal kicks. They went man for man, and it seemed to work. They seemed to stifle Poland, and they did well.
Anyone in particular impress you?
Like to Dowda, Egan at the back. He was like a rock at times, and obviously the goal scorer Brian. I thought he did really well as well.
So you were in Sky Sports News studio with Jim White. I can't believe he's 61, by the way. He's looking well for his age. And you were chatting about, obviously, the altercation with Roy going back to Sunderland days. But before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about the background of Sunderland. You moved to from Mansfield. Good move. Fans' favourite. I think you were runner-up to Dean Whitehead and Player of the Year. You got relegated. And then I think Big Quinny was in charge, wasn't he, for a little bit of few weeks before Roy came in. But tell us a little bit about when Roy took over. Like, what were your initial thoughts, or maybe the players' feelings of this legendary, iconic player taking his first steps into management?
Well, it was a weird one for me, because my family's Man United, and obviously growing up I watched a lot of Man United, and he was one of my idols. So for him to be coming in and being my gaffer, it was like a dream come true, if you like. He used to join in training, and he was absolutely ridiculous. He was phenomenal. But his standards were that high, and I think he was used to, players of United calibre. I think he got frustrated quite quickly with some of us,
So he came in the August time. You were kind of in and out of the team up until maybe November. So before that altercation that you did have, row that you had, whatever way you want to call it, like, was there any grumblings between you and him? Had this been coming, or was it kind of out of the blue?
No, it was pretty much out of the blue. Obviously, I was in and out of the team. I think we'd been beat the week before it all kicked off with me and him. And I'd not played that well. That's probably why I wasn't involved in the training session. So I didn't see it coming, no, but I was young and hot-headed myself, and I always stood up for myself. I always have done. And when this happened in training, and I was just stood watching in the cold, I just thought, no, this can't happen. If I'm going to be stood here, I'd rather go in the gym or do something active. Do you know what I mean? So it all kicked off, and I'm not saying anything that's not already been in his book. You know what I mean? So things happened, and I was away the next day after the argument we had.
So for anybody that's not quite aware of like training ground kind of scenarios, and it was an 11v11, obviously there was more than 22 players in and around training that day, so you were left on the sideline, and this quite often happens, does it, with mainly younger players. You very rarely get it with established senior players, which you obviously were at that time, so understandably felt a little bit annoyed. And then so goes inside, and then in his office, and he's mentioned, as you've already said, in his book, and he quite admired you for the way you stood up to him.
Yeah, well, as you've touched on there in training, you do the 11v11s, and usually it's either trialists or kids that sort of sit out and watch while the lads are training. So, it was hard for me to swallow watching it and being involved in that. So I started walking in. He started shouting at me. We've argued a little bit. I've carried on walking in. He's told me not to, and pleasantries were involved in all that. And then obviously I've gone in. We've had a massive argument in his office, nearly come to blows and stuff. So the next day, literally as I was leaving, he just said, look, this was a Thursday, by the way. So as I'm leaving his office, he's just said, keep your phone on. That's you done. So I got in the car, spoke to my agent, and the next day I'm down at Stoke. So
there was no signs of this. Like sometimes, I've had loan moves where it happens quite quickly, but in the background, your agent's speaking to you about, look, such and such might be interested in you. But this has come just out of the blue, and maybe because of the volatile nature of him and you standing up to him. And I think he's mentioned as well that it was the first time a player really stood up to him in that fashion.
Yeah, I didn't see it come in. That's for sure. There was nothing in the background going on. Because I was young as well myself, and like I said, hot-headed, and I was in and out of the team, I was already kind of getting frustrated. So when this happened, for me, it didn't matter that it was Roy Keane. I didn't care. It doesn't matter who the gaffer is. If I don't agree with something, then that's just my way. So no, I didn't see it coming, and it did happen really, really quickly. And in hindsight, it was a great thing for me because I went on and played the best stuff that I've played at Stoke.
So he's obviously been in the news with the Harry Arthur, John Walters. Martin was the one who actually brought it up pre-international meet-up a couple of weeks ago. So it certainly hasn't helped things. Then we had the unfortunate incident where Stephen Ward's WhatsApp got leaked. Naive on his part, of course, and he should quite rightly feel betrayed that it's got out, certainly between friends. But when you listen to what's said and what he's saying, and I don't think Stephen Ward in any way is being inflammatory about the way that Roy is. Can you see it though? So you've obviously witnessed it firsthand. So can you see where Stephen Ward is coming from on it?
Well, I don't think he's lied at all, because of them things that has been said, and Ward, he said that he's heard. They were said to me when we were sat in the office, and he sat across from me and we were arguing. The C word must have been mentioned, I'm not kidding, 30 times before I stood up and went up to walk out. So I can see that he's probably said them. I just think football's changing so much, mate, and the world's changing so much that he should know by now that you can't go speaking to people like that. There's a certain way how to speak. We've spoke about it before, the modern day footballer and stuff. You have to know your players and how to handle players and how to speak to players. And I think he's obviously just gone about it the wrong way.
Yeah, so the incident that happened with you was 12 years ago now. It's hard to believe it's that long. So now, firstly, he's not actually the manager, which has been pointed out by Harry Arthur, by all accounts, allegedly via Stephen Ward's leaked WhatsApp. And secondly, you've just touched on it. Players are different. Society is different. So this type of shenanigans, it just shouldn't be going on, especially from an assistant manager. I can't remember in my time in 20 years playing football of an assistant manager that was that antagonistic, that was that way inclined. What's your take on him now as the assistant manager?
And gets aggressive, and he's got to learn from doing things like that. You can't carry on doing that.
Another sideshow to this international get-together has been the Declan Rice saga. Now, Kevin Kilbane was on here a couple of weeks ago and he was very strong in his stance a bit. So a couple of weeks ago we've been talking. And I said, look, take for example someone like Liam Lawrence. I don't have a clue what your Irish backgrounds are. Predicament that he has?
No, not really. I remember when I was coming in with you guys for the first time, I was scared to death because I didn't know if I'd be accepted. I didn't know what the atmosphere would be like. But once I made that decision, the Irish background, by the way, is on my dad's side. Just so you know.
Cheers for the clarity.
But once I made that decision, there was never ever any doubt ever from that moment what I wanted to do. And there's been players in the past that have done this over the last few years. I think Jermaine Pennant was one as well, wasn't he?
And Grealish being the prime example, wasn't he?
Grealish as well, and these sort of players. You can't make a decision and then go back on it. just because you want to go and play for somebody else. I don't agree with it at all. Once you've made that decision, stick to it, because people like yourselves and the nation of Ireland will lose all respect.
Yeah. Well, listen, just looking forward to next month. We've touched on the Wales performance. We've got Denmark and Wales next. What are you anticipating? Because I think it's, to a degree, the other night's result has just calmed things down a little bit. But there's obviously still bigger issues here at stake. And let's not forget, Wales destroyed us and Denmark comfortably beat Wales on Sunday.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be a tough 2 games coming up, that's for sure. I do think there were positives from the other night that they'll take, especially defensively. You know, against Wales, we were far too open and there was far too many gaps down the side of the centre halves. But it seemed a lot better the other night. But again, they've got a massive test in Denmark, haven't they? I mean, they've got rights to put wrong from last time. So it's going to be a tough ask, but we'll see what happens. They need to get a fully fit squad as well and hope this Roy Keane thing blows over.
Before you go, Liam, I just want to touch on, because we didn't get time the last time we ran out of it, I just want to touch on Stoke. So, relegated from the Premier League, lots of comings and going. Obviously, Gary Rowett instilled as the new manager, sitting 18th in the Championship at the moment. Obviously, our prime focus from this side is looking at James McLean and how he does, and unfortunately he's out injured at the moment. How would you assess their start so far?
Well, I'll just touch on James. He's just starting to find his feet. It was a little bit slow at first, but he said he needed his match fitness and he said he needed his games. And to be fair, the last couple of games, he's looked sharp. He's looked back to his best, like back to his old self. From a Stoke point of view, I don't know if the losing mentality is just rife through the club, but something's not right. I said last year they needed to get rid of about 10, 11 players. They haven't got rid of that many. And it just seems to me that something's still not right in the club. I spoke to someone inside the club at the West Brom game the other week, and they said they've got rid of most of the bad eggs now that they need to get rid of, and they're looking forward to try and move on with things. But again, the performance against West Brom, the last game, wasn't good enough. So I'm doing the Wednesday game at the weekend, so I'll have to have a look and see what's happening.
Liam, listen, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up with you in the next couple of weeks.
Cheers, Keith.
So that was Liam Lawrence from his lovely room back in...
Yeah, very impressive.
I don't know exactly where it is. I think it's near-ish to Stoke.
Didn't recognise him without the
what?
Blonde hair.
Bleach blonde.
Yeah.
He was a good old servant for us, Liam. I enjoyed playing with him. You mentioned about, we were just chatting there off air about the free kick he scored.
Thomond Park.
Yeah. He was I liked Liam a lot, actually. A lot. He knew exactly what you were going to get from him. He had really good quality from set pieces, fit into that Ireland team seamlessly, really did. And the shenanigans we had behind the scenes, he was a good fella.
It's funny you mentioned set pieces, and I remember going to games for years. I used to get excited when we got a corner, and because we always had, especially when you're playing European teams, they don't like, I know it's a cliche,
physical side of it.
Yeah, you throw one into the mixer and they don't like it. And we obviously, down the years, we had some very big centre forwards, so it made perfect sense. Yeah. But now I don't know, when they're putting balls into the box or taking corners, I just sometimes wonder what's going to happen. And when you've got Shane Duffy there, I'm thinking, like, he should be scoring more goals. But O'Neill has talked about they don't really practice corners.
No, I don't think it's something that they do. Like Neil Lennon's spoken about it in detail about Martin never did that, and that's the point I was making before about has he changed enough? Because players are used to the detail. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. Like with Shane Duffy, like you're right, we have got a prime player there where we should be so dangerous. Yeah. And if you go back to the impact he made in his debut, going back before the Euros a couple of years ago, it was dominant, aerially, defensively, obviously. But then, anytime we got a set piece,
it's like terrifying.
Create a little bit of space and just throw a little bit of detail in to the delivery has to be spot on. We're going to speak to a man in a minute whose delivery was absolutely spot on more often than not. Get the delivery right, nail the run, and Shane Duffy's going to cause you problems.
Even if he doesn't get on it, something I've noticed with Liverpool this season with Van Dijk, he hasn't scored, but what it's doing is it's creating space for other players, because opposition defenders are terrified of Van Dijk because of his height. So even the Leicester game, Firmino scored from a corner, and I'm thinking we should be able to do something like that, where And we have other players that are well. Like Kieran Clark is perfectly capable of going up there and scoring a goal. But if you're not practicing set pieces, I remember my dad for years, David Beckham. Sure, all you can do is whip in a corner or a free kick. But it was an amazing free kick or an amazing
practice.
Absolutely.
And it's a proper acquired skill that takes time. The type of delivery. We're joined on the phone actually by someone who was quite decent at set pieces, former Irish international Andy Reid. Andy, thanks for joining us.
No problem, lads.
What's your take on them set pieces before we get into the nitty gritty? How much did you practice?
Well, listen, it needs lots and lots of practice, repetitiveness, and sometimes it gets a little bit boring after a while. But if you keep doing the same things with it, keep putting the ball in the same area, the lads keep making the same runs, then eventually it will click. But it does take a lot of practice, and more so, in the modern game, there's nothing left to chance anymore. Everything is done all the time. It's kept going and kept going. So it needs to be practiced. It's not something that you can just turn up on the day and expect it to happen. It doesn't really work like that anymore.
Really, we've had a tough couple of weeks. We've been discussing it here, getting dug into some of the issues that have gone on in the last couple of weeks. If I bring you back 7 days ago to the game in Cardiff against Wales, look, we know it wasn't great. Can you cherry pick or kind of focus on what were the most alarming parts of that performance for you?
It was for me. It was that nobody seemed to be getting close to anybody. Wales seemed to have so much time on the ball, and that was worrying for me because I'm thinking lots of different things. There, I'm thinking to myself, why is that happening? The units are too far apart. The midfielders didn't want to go and close anybody down because they got picked off. We we definitely should have had three in midfield against their three. So there was a lot of things that were quite alarming. But when you're in a game and sometimes we've all played in games where it's not been going quite well and you're getting popped, and the one thing that you want to do is try and get close to somebody and leave a little bit on them, get a tackle in, try and win the ball back, try and do something. And the Irish players didn't have the platform to do that in the game.
Now, one aspect of this international camp has been Roy Keane. If we bring it back a couple of weeks ago, Martin was the one who really highlighted the altercations between Roy and Harry Arthur, Roy and John Walters. He's someone that you know quite well. You've played with him obviously at international level. When you came into the squad, he was the captain, and then also at club level, he was your manager. So, firstly, as a player, what made him tick? What was he like, really?
Well, I got asked this the other day, obviously because there's been lots of talk about everything that's been going on. So I got asked this the other day about what was it about Roy. And as a player, I remember, we came into the squad and he came back into the squad afterwards because he hadn't been playing for a while since Saipan. But when he came back into the squad, the lads that didn't really know him were a little bit tentative and like, what's he going to be like? And he was great with us, he really was great with us. And I think what made him special, I've never played with a player before or after who had such an effect on the group in regards to when he came in, everybody seemed to kind of lift their game 1 or 2%. That can work both ways as well. As there's some people who aren't mentally strong can be a bit intimidated by that and can find that a little bit difficult. But we had a really good group of lads there, and most of the lads were pretty mentally strong. So he normally got a raise out of us, and everybody went up. And I've never really experienced that with any other player having that kind of effect.
He had a huge presence, like there's no doubt about that. And his standards, everybody you speak to, like you've just alluded to, Manchester United, the standards that he sets, he's just not willing to drop beneath that. So when you have him then as a manager, did that change in any way because he steps onto the other side of the fence?
No, them standards are still there. I found with a manager, it wasn't so much, because the Sunderland players, when we were there, we weren't as good as the Man United teams that Roy played in. And I don't necessarily think it was always the quality that he was a stickler about, because he knew that we weren't as good as Manchester United. I think the thing that really bothered him was the mentality. He didn't see why we couldn't have a good or strong mentality as Manchester United. And I'll give you an example. He used to say, when Man United go away from home, they play exactly the same way. They pass the ball early doors, they get stuck in, they try and get goals early doors, they attack the game, no different to how they would attack a home game. and he didn't. And he said that's a mentality thing, and he didn't understand why all players couldn't have that type of mentality.
Andy, did he actually? What kind of role did he have on the training field? Did he do much coaching?
No, didn't do much coaching. He was more of a manager. I think he was kind of feeling his way into the coaching. I think he was doing his pro license as he was manager at Sunderland. So he was kind of feeling his way into the coaching kind of side of it. So he didn't really do too much coaching. Tony Loughlin was there who done coaching, but it quite worked. It ended up it didn't work out in the end. We lost a few games, and things kind of came on top a little bit, but it got Sunderland promoted and kept us up in the 4 seasons. So it was a relatively successful stint.
But when you just say that, he talked about Manchester United when they play away from home, they play the same way. The fact that he's at a club that haven't got the same ability as Manchester United, is that not where, as a manager, maybe he has to accept that? And I don't know, did he show huge signs of frustration if that wasn't the case, if you weren't playing the way he wanted to play?
No, he didn't. And as I said, I'll just go back to what I said. It wasn't so much with the ability that he was, because he knew that we weren't Manchester United. He knew that we weren't as good as the players that he'd been playing with. It wasn't that. It was more the mentality kind of thing that he wanted. He wanted us to kind of to be the same away from home as we were at home, because we were really good at home. We picked up lots of good results at home, and that's our home form kept us up. So, when we go away from home, he was like, come on, you need to reproduce the same stuff away from home. And that's a mentality thing as opposed to an ability thing, because we know we had the ability to do it because we'd done it at home. So I agreed with him in that kind of sense, but we weren't quite there yet, unfortunately, for us.
Andy, we both know how much the game has changed, I would say even drastically, since he was your manager at Sunderland. The way the players expect certain things, tactically, information. We were speaking about set piece, the level of detail. It's not like 20 years ago, just stick it on the penalty spot, we'll go and head it. So if we focus on Roy in particular, does he need to change his approach, especially when you hear little bits and bobs that have come out via the Stephen Ward recording over the weekend, which were obviously very unfortunate? Does he need to change with his approach, or can he change?
Do you mean in relation to how he was speaking to them players?
Yeah, how he treats the players and his approach and that kind of...
Well, I think there's a little bit of both. I know it has totally changed. We know that it's totally changed, and some of the things that have come out, if they were what was said, then it's probably taken a little bit too far. On the other side of things as well, I do think players need to toughen up a little bit. I think players are a little bit too soft and a little bit too precious for me. I mean, there's many a bollocking that we've got. You know what I mean? And it's tough. Like, you know what I mean? You have to deal with it. You have to be strong, and you have to kind of get on with it. So I think players need to be a little bit stronger, if I'm being honest with you, and a little bit tougher nowadays. I think that they're a little bit too precious.
So when you look at this squad, Andy, so there's a lot made of, and I mentioned about you making your debut in 2003, just vast majority Premier League players, and obviously Roy Keane getting back into the equation, Duffer, Robbie Keane, etc., etc. When you look at the squad now, the management team, is this where we are? Are we, or should we become used to seeing performances like this, the results that we've had in recent months? Is this where we are, or should we be doing better?
I think we should be doing better. Judging by, I mean, listen, if you take into account that we qualified for one tournament and lost out to one by the playoffs, okay, and obviously it was very, very disappointing the second game against Denmark, and at times you would like the football to be better, but if you just take them two, that's not a bad return for the group of players that we've got. You would like to play in a little bit better football, a little bit more exciting football. But, you've got to look at the fact that, although we do expect a little bit more, we've got to look at the fact that the players aren't the quality of players that we have had in years gone by. And you can kind of gloss it up and say, we need to do this and we need to do that. But we need better to start producing better players. And the stuff going on at underage level, I know you've worked at the underage stuff as well, Keith, and I've done it as well. And, I'm doing it at the moment. And there's a lot of work going on to try and produce these players. And they're just not coming through with the natural kind of talent and the natural ability as people like Robbie and Damien Duff and players like that. not them gems coming through at the moment. There's a few players on.
What's your take on that? Really, is it a generational problem, society, and the options that these kids have? Is it how difficult it is to make it at a big club in England? When we went over, we were up against English, Scottish, Welsh lads. Now you're going into a U team and a Premier League team. You're coming up against players from South America all across the world.
Yeah, it is a generational thing, like what you said. I think one thing that really strikes me, and I've spoke about this quite a bit, right? And kids playing out on the street, you just don't see it anymore. You just don't see it. Everything is, you never see a group of lads from one street playing against the lads from around the corner. We used to do that when we were kids, and it was good. It helped you kind of develop your winning mentality because you didn't want to lose against them. It helped you develop your skills because you were trying things in close control, and I think that's been taken away now. And everything is players are going to soccer camps or they're going to football training, and there's not so much football out on the street anymore. And I think that's reflecting in the type of players that we're producing as well. We don't have them. I mean, Robbie Keane's one of the most naturally kind of gifted players that we've ever produced. Everything that he'd done was so instinctive, and that comes from playing out on the streets and playing with his mates. How can I get a goal? How can I do this? And he's a perfect example of it.
Yeah, you're trying to replicate that, but it's very hard, like you said, to replicate it in a summer camp. I've been at those summer camps as a coach, and I can remember back even as a kid, you practice all these moves, but you basically learn it on the street. So how do we get over that then?
Well, I think what needs to be done is probably safer in environments. I mean, we used to go out on the street and just play out on the street, and it's not so simple as that anymore. Yeah. Society has changed, so it's difficult. You know what I mean? There's a lot more. Well, just if you strip it back to the bare bones, there's a lot more traffic on the streets nowadays, so it's not as safe for kids. So I think safe for kind of maybe five-a-side pitches that are maintained and that are looked after and maybe monitored. That kids can use. I think that might be a bit of a start to getting kids back out, and I think parents have to take a bit of responsibility. I mean, when we were kids, in the summer holidays, and not because she wanted us to go out and play football, but because she wanted to get rid of us. My ma would say, "Right, out you's going. I don't want to see you until dinner."
You come in for dinner. That's it.
It is though, isn't it? It's a huge issue. Andy's involved with the underage teams at the moment. I have been involved, and I'm sure he's in agreement that we have got some very promising young players. But it's getting that combination, and obviously a lot depends on what they're doing, obviously, when they go across the water, the new national leagues in place. Andy, before you go, just want to ask you about next month. After the Poland game, maybe a few little positive signs for us. A few players I thought done quite well. What are you expecting from the doubleheader next month?
Listen, there was lots of positives to take from the game, and Poland got a great result against Italy there the week before. So you're playing against a really, really top side. So it was going to be difficult, and they got a decent result. So they should take that positives, try and put the Wales one to bed. It's going to be difficult, against Denmark. It really is. They're a good side. We watched them against Wales, and they were really, really they were really on the money. Now I have to say they were really, really good. So it's going to be tough, but listen, when our backs are against the wall, then you want to come out fighting and you want to give it a right go, and that's all Irish people I think want to see is people giving it a right go and having a good kind of go at it, really.
Yeah, listen, I totally agree. Listen, we really appreciate you taking the time. We'll catch you again soon.
Take care, lads.
Thanks,
bye.
He's right. Highlights. Look, take the Ireland chat kind of out of the equation. The player development, Drew, is something that I'm very engrossed in and interested and intrigued in, and we're definitely going to revisit it in the next few weeks and have a look at the overall structure. But he's right. Look, generation different. Facilities
as well. Just something that picking up on there, where you talk about players developing and going across. The fact is, players are staying here, and we have to make sure that if they are staying here, we have everything in place that we can still develop them. And if they go over a little later, that's fine, because a 15-year-old mightn't want to go over. You think?
Well, it's not. I've said this before, Phil. It's not one cap fits all. It really isn't. I went over at 15 years of age.
Yeah.
So young, really was, and it split my family in terms of mother didn't want me to go. All the men in the family were going, you can't. I was desperate to go, whereas some kids aren't mature enough.
Yeah.
They need to stay. They need to. You're not mature mentally enough, but also physically you can go over and you could be a late developer. You're not really making inroads until you get towards 19, 20. Prime example. Yeah. And so many of them have come via that League of Ireland route now. And I think we'll see more and more with the new national leagues being put in place. But with everything, it's going to take time. And at the moment...
We don't have time.
We don't have time, Phil, but there's nothing we can do about that at the moment.
The Euros are in 2 years. There's games here. And for the FAI and John Delaney, it's unthinkable that we're going to the Aviva Stadium to watch Spain against a different team.
I know.
And not us.
I know. Oh, look, it'd be a disaster. But I think there's two different discussions here. One is the senior men's team having their own agenda, getting us there. The World Cup after that, Qatar is going to be difficult, as we know, with seedings and rankings, and it's just more difficult to get to World Cups. But then the different discussion is the player development and how that's going to take time. There's two huge different avenues there. But look, it's I don't think it's going to get better before it gets worse. I really don't. I think when you nail it down, 57, 58 teams eligible to qualify for the European Championships is going to be 24. Surely should we be there?
Yeah, well, they're trying to make it as easy as possible. When you think the first one we played in, there was only 8. Like, they were the elite, and we were part of the elite. And we were in France, and it was great. We played some good football, and we want more of the same. But it'd be an absolute disaster. And that's why I'm not making too much of the Poland performance, because it all comes down to next month. And when Denmark come into town, there could be a bit of a haunting factor when they, if they score a goal, we just think back to what happened last year. Because that was one of the worst nights.
Let's not.
We can't end on such a negative.
Right, we're going to end on a positive. Premier League fixtures the weekend. Pick one out.
Well, the first one back is Spurs-Liverpool.
Yeah.
So Liverpool have won 4 from 4. Spurs, we all thought were going to win 4 from 4, but they got beaten by Watford.
Yeah.
And you think it's always hard to gauge these ones. I can remember at this time last season, City played Liverpool. It was the first game back after the international break. Obviously, Mane gets sent off and Liverpool get thumped.
Yeah, it was 5-1, wasn't it?
It was 5-0.
5-0.
Yeah, they also got thumped by Spurs at Wembley last season. But the difference this time is no Mignolet and no Lovren. Lovren had a shocker. He got taken off after half an hour.
Hang on a minute, Phil. Lovren's one of the best centre-halves in the world. Have you not heard his comment?
Well, what happened Croatia the other night without them, you know?
Exactly.
6.
Look, I think, look at Liverpool. Obviously, it's been strengthened, the spine of the team. They just look so sound defensively. And we all know about what they can do going forward, the energy in the team. They've got a squad now. Whereas last year, they didn't even have a 1-11. They had top end of the pitch, phenomenal front three that were on fire in different periods. Salah in the main, but Mane and Firmino at different stages. I think Firmino's a big part of what they do, but obviously Van Dijk, Gomez alongside him, I do really like pace, power again. Alisson behind that, Keita coming into midfield. We know that. A little bit worried about Spurs though.
Yeah,
they look jaded. I know there's been a lot made about Harry Kane this week.
Why was he even there? Why did he even go for the friendly game against Switzerland?
Yeah, I don't know. And Gareth Southgate's someone who I think has done very well in his job, and not just results, not just the World Cup. I think so the way he's gone about it, he cannot do much more. He's been brave in his approach, the style, the team selection, the personnel. He's going to try and build for future campaigns by not just picking 30-odd-year-olds just to get us by. And you look at Harry Kane, you think, look, all right, he plays the first game against Spain, fair enough. You have to play in that game. Yeah. But then get him away. Let him go away with his missus and new kids for a couple of days and get a bit of sun on his back. Come back to Spurs on Wednesday. Bang, there you go. Build up to the Liverpool game, and it changes scenery. Just mentally refresh you. I think sometimes too much can be made of, he's this, he's that. But like, there has been signs that he has looked jaded.
Well, I always feel with Harry Kane as well, when he picks up an injury, he always comes back a lot quicker than is expected. And I wonder, is he rushed back?
But they're just so reliant on him, and that's what it is. Llorente's obviously come in at the beginning of last season, just doesn't give them the same. But are you going to attract the top centre forward to play second fiddle? No, because it's the way they play. And England are the same. England are so reliant on him. They really are. Rashford has obviously got huge promise. Needs to play more at club level. That's a different debate. But they they don't have a lot now. When you look at years gone by, when England, the centre forwards they had, it was like Shearer and another maybe. Different stages throughout his career. There was the up and comings of Fowler, Sheringham.
Fowler didn't get as much of a look in as he should have for the quality that he had.
There was a lot. There was an abundance of talent in that area. Ian Wright as well, like proper natural goal scorers and strikers that they could play two up. Whereas now, like I don't think Vardy would have fitted into a two. I think Sterling with a different type of system they play suits them, even though his final little bit of quality lacks at times. Rashford would be the one.
Yeah.
But take Keane out of the equation. You don't really have a base up there to go and play off. Rashford can't do that yet because he hasn't played enough games as a centre forward. So that's Harry Kane.
Yeah.
Add in all the other Belgian players that played at the World Cup. Christian Eriksen, even though he looked very good against Wales last weekend.
Dele Alli is carrying a knock, mightn't even be fit for it.
Exactly. It's just a little bit.
It's one of those though where I can see maybe a draw. This is actually the first fixture that Jurgen Klopp had as Liverpool manager now, was played at White Hart Lane, but if Liverpool do win, it's a massive win. If they avoid defeat, I think they'd be happy enough. But a win, and suddenly they're on 5 from 5. And I'm starting to think with Liverpool, they put all the eggs really into the Champions League basket last season. So they should have finished top 4 comfortably, but they stuttered over the line. They still took it to the last day of the season. They have to be surely focusing on the Premier League.
I agree. They need to nail that down. And look, we can say that, and I think it should be the case, but it's Champions League week this week. They'll do both. And but it gets to the crunch. It gets to the crunch. Like, you left Keita out in the last game, which I was very surprised at.
Yeah.
He has got a squad now. That is the only thing I would say to counter it, that he will be able to tweak 2 or 3 players, because once it gets into the nitty-gritty of the season, and if you're still involved in domestic cup competitions, that's when it just builds up. And it's a fine line for manager.
January is the month that has tripped them up in the last few years.
And sometimes you don't realise players are jaded until it's too late. And when that happens, season implodes. How often have we seen teams going, like Man City last year, FA Cup versus Wigan, they're going for the treble, they're going for the quadruple, bang, bang, bang. Then they're down to just the 2 competitions they can win. So it's about getting that balance right. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The sports science, the medical, the fitness people, all combining together, ultimately with the manager in cohesion with that, to get a squad that come March, when it's knockout stages of Champions League games and latter stages of cups, if they're still in them, that they're all still as fresh as they can realistically be come March of a season.
I know you're at City and Fulham. Bring your calculator. There's no way.
You just put the kiss of death on that, haven't you?
Okay.
You have. You just put the kiss of death.
That cannot end 0-0. That's for sure.
Fulham are such a different side in personnel to what they were last year, and they were very impressive last year. Sessegnon didn't play the last game. They're great. They're a great team to watch. Really, really enjoyable. 2 teams that got up last year, Wolves and Fulham from the Championship, are so good to watch. Good to see them in the Premier League. But you're right, they won't go to Man City on Saturday. I don't think they'll go and do a Rafa.
Yeah.
Now, it's not going to be a case of parking the Newcastle bus and trying to break us down. They'll have a go. Yeah. So look, I'm with you in principle. I kind of think probably have put the kiss of death on that.
I look at the way Bournemouth have gone to the Etihad the last few seasons under Eddie Howe. They go with the plan of sticking to the way they play, and they cause City problems. They'll probably score, but they ultimately end up getting absolutely thumped. 4-5-1.
So go on, give me a prediction for Man City against Fulham.
I'm going to say, like, you could be looking at 5-2, 6-1. It can't be 0-0.
I hope we get that. Listen, time has beaten us. Appreciate you coming in. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Enjoy your birthday celebrations.
I will.
Anything special planned?
Nothing at all. Nothing at all I'm going to tell you a lot about. You can watch the show back on YouTube, usual social platforms. We will be back next week. Until then, take it easy.